Welcome to Improv Your Parenting, the art of turning parenting into play. Today we're joined by Lacy Alana. Lacy is a psychotherapist, trainer, and applied improvisation specialist who integrates play, neuroscience, and relational work across therapy, education, and community contexts. She's the founder of Yes and Brain and co-director of Camp Yes and, a nationally recognized program combining improv and social learning for neurodivergent youth and the adults who support them. Lacy has designed and facilitated improv-based programs in shelters, schools, and treatment centers, and she regularly trains therapists, parents, and educators on using improvisation as a tool for connection, communication, and co-regulation. She also integrates improvisation into her therapy practice, teaching parents and families how to use improv principles to strengthen connection, flexibility, and co-regulation at home. Her work bridges the clinical and the creative, grounded in neuroscience and trauma theory, and delivered through the joy and adaptability and spontaneity play. Lacy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Great to be here with you.
Wonderful. I'm going to start with how do you interact with kids and what role does improv play in those interactions?
It plays lots of different roles, which I'll talk more about, but I'm a psychotherapist and work in all sorts of different domains, but do a lot of work in neurodivergence and trauma. And so I use improv in my psychotherapeutic work, in addition to running some specialized improv theater programming in the summer. In Indiana, I run Camp Yes and with Jim Ansaldo, which is a program kind of dually teaching, helping professionals to integrate improv work with neurodivergent youth, and also a program for neurodivergent youth. And along the way, I've worked also in residential treatment centers for kids in foster care and kids who aren't in foster care. And I've worked in shelters and schools and community settings in addition to private practice. And so I've worked with kids in lots and lots of different capacities. And in terms of kind of the role that improv plays, I can keep talking about it. I know I've been going.
No, it's good.
It is sometimes improv is the modality of kind of interaction. It is perhaps programming that is like, this is an improv class for a specific group of youth, whether that's just mainstream youth or neurodivergent youth or youth residing in a shelter. And other times I would say that improv isn't something that is like we're doing an improv activity or exercise, but that always serves as a foundational underpinning of how I'm approaching the work with youth and also with adults, even in therapy office kind of setting. So all the time.
So yeah, it sounds like it's everywhere.
Yep.
How did you get into using it in all of those spaces? I mean, I would imagine it was an iterative process, but can you talk about the development of that?
An iterative process. Wouldn't have, this was not the anticipated goal, but I would have imagined for myself.
Sure.
I was a theater kid growing up, and then I was away from theater when I was in university, and then started taking improv theater classes after a breakup because I was like, okay, I need to just get out of the house and do something fun. And Shayna Merlin, who ran one of the improv schools in Austin where I was living at the time, had come as a guest speaker to one of my university classes. And I was just like, that would be a fun, good thing to do when you're trying to not sit at home and stare at the ceiling and feel sad for yourself. And it was a great thing to do. And I think like a lot of adults who take improv classes or retake them after being theater kids, there's a lot of recognition of, oh yeah, this is like really relevant for regular life. And there are lessons here. And at the same time, I was in school for clinical social work, a bit down kind of the line after I was further as a couple years in. And at one point was working in a residential treatment center on an adolescent boys neurobehavioral unit. And it was really just seeing a lot of the parallels between the improv that at that point I was teaching myself in the very school that I'd come through the series of classes in a couple years later. And and so it started this idea of, what would it be like to integrate this into group therapy on the unit, which I had to run every single day. There's no shortage of time to practice. Okay, we're going to try to make this thing than just listing out coping skills. And so it really became a very effective modality to get like experiential, interactive opportunities to engage with these different topics that we were trying to cover. And so that really well. And then with a cluster of folks at the Hideout Theater, we're looking at, okay, can we start specific programming for autistic youth and other community groups, and launched a trial series. And then that expanded and then went into all of the different settings. And so it just grew from there. And then, was working with some treatment facilities running improv specific groups for folks who are in a trauma treatment program, for folks in an eating disorder clinic, running like multi-family group therapy with it, going into queer youth drop-in centers, shelters, like kind of all over the place. So I really, was integrating it into my kind of like professional day job in addition to creating and building these other avenues as well.
That's amazing. So it sounds like it was effective in so many different spaces. Did you notice a variance in effectiveness or just sort of like, no, this works?
Yeah, I really feel like it works. And that, in terms of straight up, okay, what improv game might you use with this group or that group? There's always ways to customize or tweak that. But I think the fundamental piece of it, I think a lot about being in your yes and brain, which is also the name of my organization. Big does trainings and things conveniently. But this piece of not only, okay, what are the like exercise or activities or elements of improv we might be using in the specific thing we're doing, whether that is just improv class or it is a family therapy session, but also this piece of how do we tap into kind of this part of our brain that is really rooted in the same things that help an improviser be a good improviser, that also help a therapist be a good therapist, that help a human be good at connecting with another human. These things like spontaneity and flexibility and being truly present, both with yourself and the other person there, attuned and ready to pick up on the information you're getting. These are the things that make a great improviser, but they're also the exact same things that make someone good at all of those other things. And so I think the application and what that looks like may be somewhat different in all of the settings, but ultimately it's like that is never not helpful. Like, even if you're not doing...
No matter what you're doing.
Yeah, not utilizing like this improv activity, it's like the framework underneath that is never not helpful.
And it sounds as well like you've worked with multiple ages, young teen through adult, older as well. Have you worked with younger kids than teens as well? Okay.
Yeah.
And how does it vary in terms of the age of the people you're working with? Maybe you could describe like what you would do with a particular age and then what you would do with a higher age and how those would differ.
Sure. So, it depends on the context of the class and what the objective is, if there is one. A class where a specific group is coming to develop and learn specific improv skills, or is this like, maybe that's like a weekly series class the same students are attending, or is this a class that happened in the local family shelter downtown, which we also ran for many years, in which case, if they walk away with some improv skills, but really we're looking at having fun, getting to express yourself, communicate, like building some of these skills, that the confidence that they can then take other places. And so I think the overall approach varies, but I'm always thinking about, for any group, like, how can I meet them where they are? With an older population, maybe you're going to be able to do a lot of things around story and talk about that really intricately, or even play out a narrative long form improv of making a full length improvised play and working on those skills. Whereas you wouldn't expect that cognitively of a 5-year-old, because that wouldn't make any sense. But at the same time, you can very much do a lot of the same activities. You as the leader and instructor just will be the one responsible for scaffolding that for their learning. So I'm not going to get into, okay, who is the hero and the protagonist and what are who is their advisor and mentor? Because a 5-year-old can, are you even talking about? But you can absolutely, you keep those things in mind and co-create a story together and play characters, and the way that you might tell a teenager, think of a character and here's all these different dimensions you can think of, now go. I wouldn't necessarily do that with a younger, and even some teenagers. It might also be, okay, great, let's talk about one factor of being a different character. Can we talk in a different voice? Okay, great. What are different ways you could hold your body? What are different, and you might build those skills progressively. So I guess that's the long answer to say, rarely have any like, never do this with that group, only do this with this group, as much as it is about adapting what you're doing to the population you're working with, and looking at, okay, how can I fold and frame this in a way that meets someone where they are cognitively, emotionally, in all of the different ways to help them build success and stack skills.
And it sounds like that adaptability, then it requires, and you specifically mentioned this, meeting them where they are. How do you measure, where are they? And then here's what I can do with that.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'd say sometimes depending on where you're teaching, you may have an idea. If, for example, you're like, okay, I'm teaching this class for 12 and 13-year-olds. Okay, I have a general sense of what some of the developmental realities might be in that class. Whereas other times, like in the shelter setting, it was an improv class for all youth at the shelter that were 4 to 18. And any given week, you might have any number of ages in the room. It might be all teens one week and a very mixed group. You've got littles and bigs next week. There's all of these variations of what is there. And so I would say often, especially if you're walking in and you don't know who you're getting, because even realistically, if you're teaching a class for 12 to 13-year-olds, it's like, you still don't really know who you're getting. Like there's a lot of little realities, a lot of personalities in the room. And I often just start with some kind of like low bar kind of assessment games, make it sound way more formal than it actually is. But I think about this reality the same way in an improv scene in all other contexts. Like whatever information you're getting is useful information. And when we learn to listen to and see what are the things and the information we're being given that may be directly said to us, but that may also not be directly said, but that we see in the way that, okay, this kid is hovering against the corner and wishes they could disappear into the wall. And this other kid is taking up loads of space. And okay, so we need, even within one group, kids often need different things. And so it's figuring out, okay, what does that structure look like? How can I change or adapt this to meet whoever they are, where they are? But I think that the best way ultimately is through the iterative cycles. You go in with whatever you guess you've got when you walk in the door and see, okay, how are the people in this room? Are they sitting there all quiet and not speaking and separated out from each other? Okay, then that already lets me know maybe we need a little bit to get folks feeling safe and comfortable and expressing. Or do I walk into the room and everyone's running amok? And okay, now I know we need to do some stuff to get a little bit of containing going on. And it's like through every moment that unfolds, we're getting more information about the people in front of us and how we can adapt what we're doing.
Yeah. And it sounds like that level of perception and thus adjustment is actually not just useful in teaching these workshops, but in interacting with anyone we're interacting with, but especially kids and teens over time. How did you develop that perception of here's what's needed in this moment and be able to then say, and I have that tool to use here?
Great question. Practice helps for sure. Time processing afterwards, both in an improv class, but also just in general interactions, looking to understand, okay, what happened there? What was going on? How can I make sense of what unfolded? And I think a lot about, this is a little tangential, but does link directly to this, the yes and cycle that we'll talk about of somebody makes an offer, which like on a stage is somebody comes out in it with a character or whatever. But in real life is anything. It's someone gives you a dirty look or says, hello, how are you? Any of these different, or they have their arms crossed and stare at the floor when you walk in the room, right? Like all of those are offers. And to do something with it, we have to be aware of that. So it's like on stage, I've got to be listening and paying attention so that I can know my scene partner did that. And in regular life, I can either notice or not notice those things. And then there's this piece of accepting it, which doesn't necessarily mean if someone's giving me a dirty look that I'm like, yeah, I love that you're giving me a dirty look. That's great. It's accepting that this is the thing that is happening. So this person here is giving me the dirty look. It's what's happening, which means I have to meet that where it is. I can't just wish that it wasn't happening or tell someone to not do that or ignore it. I could, but it isn't going to go well. And so I think this piece of how do we accept what this is? And the same thing on stage. Someone can offer me a glass of milk and I can say, no, thank you. I'm lactose intolerant as a character. I said no, but I'm accepting that milk is what has been offered here. And then I want to add on, right? And so it's this sort of loop that kind of takes us into this, and then that add-on is an offer, and then we repeat. And I think a big piece of it is holding awareness of not only the offers that someone else is making, but the offers that you yourself are making, both externally. What do you say back? How do you respond? And also internally, because sometimes the offers that I'm making, I didn't consciously choose them, but it comes through a tight chest or a moment of fear or an instinct to want to make everyone be quiet because I'm overwhelmed or whatever. That it's like I have to be aware of that is what is happening. And so I think the practice of responding to both yourself and other people is through that iteration of paying attention to and evaluating, okay, what is happening with me? Where am I? What is happening with them? Where are they? And I think sometimes, especially when we're in the practice phases of that work, that has to start happening in an afterwards debrief, because in the moment there may be too many emotions of your own or of theirs, and you're just trying to like either keep your head above water through the process of looking at, okay, what happened there? Like why wasn't that game working if I was doing a game? Like why were they disengaged? What was going on with that one kid who wouldn't stay in the circle? Okay, what does that tell me? What might we need? What could we possibly do? And so I think that's a lot of information, but
so there's several lines there that I'd love to follow up on, and I'm trying to figure out how to prioritize them. Is one of the ones you brought up was that you don't have to be perfect in the work you're doing. You're going back reflecting afterwards and saying what worked, what didn't. And I think that's really important to recognize as somebody from the outside is like, I'm not going to do everything perfect.
No, I still don't, like of it now that happens very automatically for me because I put in that reflection time and then the integration and then the practice. And with that reflection, then it maybe is going in and going, okay, what can I do to set myself up for success? Like when I started the shelter class, initially that was like, oh my gosh, how do I teach a class for like mystery number of children each week, mystery ages that walk in, and I've got to be like ready to just do it. And so I was like, okay, my brain can sometimes go blank in the moment of being like, okay, what's the right thing? And I made myself like a cheat sheet of different columns of types of activities broken down into, okay, this is like the regulating column that's like everybody's in chaos, this can bring it down. This is the we need some energy column. This is the we're in a circle. This is, and over time, it's like I stopped even looking at that. But initially, it's like I knew all of those things, but it created this kind of anchor for me that was both logistically useful and also like emotionally useful to just be like, I have a clipboard that I can look at and get something off of when I need to. I think it is that piece of, you don't have to be perfect. Assess it, explore it, have curiosity about it, go in with an idea, be curious about it, rinse, repeat.
And be flexible with, this is how this is going to work. It may not. And then I had this plan of what we're doing, and I'm doing this other thing now because that seems to be what makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that's it. It really is the game of throwing things out the door. And I think also one of the things that I did a lot of early on is really pick an activity or exercise and really break it down and look at it from also my clinical lens of, what function does this game play, but also what are the skills needed to be able to do this? Because there's a lot of hidden skills in everything that we do in life, right? Something that seems simple, like brushing teeth, for example. It's you've got to transition to brushing your teeth. You've got to move from one location to another place. Maybe that's adjusting to lighting or temperature in the bathroom. You've got to put toothpaste on the brush, which requires some like fine motor skills. Then you've got to know how long to do it. And then you've got to deal with textures in your mouth. And you need to rinse the brush. Also, did you even buy the toothpaste, which requires supply management? There's all of these
so much there
things, task that's just, go do that. And so I think it's the same idea for me of like when I started teaching improv and looking at wanting to know that didn't work. Like, how can I change this? I had to really break apart and look at understanding what's the purpose of this even? Like, why are we doing, like, what are the skills needed to do this? And what are other ways we can practice skills to do this thing? Because one of the things that I think is great in improv is that whatever you say is a game. And so if you're teaching it in a formal thing, it's like, you can literally be like, now we're going to do this next game. That is not a game, but that is a practice of one of the skills that is needed to do the game that you just tried to do that totally failed. Or you can talk sometimes about like the remix version. If something's going terribly, it's like, all right, cool, we're going to do a remix. So a couple things are changing, but I'm going to shift those. So
what I love about everything you're saying is, and very relevant to this podcast, is it's all useful in parenting. Everything you've talked about so far is meeting your kid where they are, whatever they're offering you, and then saying what is needed in this moment. What can I do with this child to help in whatever way help is needed or to be there. How would you describe what you do or how what you do is useful in parenting beyond what I just kind of summarized?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think those is for sure. And I think also it is the piece of the deep listening to what things your kids are doing communicate. And this seems like such an obvious thing, but I think we're really used to and expect like adult world communication with kids, which adult world communication is often heavily verbal and not fair. Exactly. We rely on words and we expect someone to think through things and all of this when it's like kids' language is not words. Like their language is play. Yeah. That's developmentally what we expect from kids. And so we go into lecture mode or we try to explain why this or why that. Like kids, they're not going to meet us there. Developmentally, they're not supposed to. And so looking for, what is the information that I'm getting? What is the need here? Okay, the kid did something that they're not supposed to be doing. Okay, what is the need? Like how and why did that happen? Are they needing more support in that moment? Were they overwhelmed so they lashed out because they didn't know how to manage it better and then they broke the whatever they broke because they weren't being careful? Is it developmentally reasonable to expect the kid of whatever age to be quote unquote careful, or do we just need to move the breakable thing off of the place where it might be in, because we're not doing anybody any favors if we're expecting 13-year-old body management from a 4-year-old. It just isn't, you can't talk someone into that. And so I think a lot of it is that of like, how do I be in this kind of present communicative state? Like, how do I pick up on those offers, the information being given to me? And I think those are the underlying pieces. And I think there's a lot of playfulness in it. Like like, yes, there's improv exercises you can do standing in a circle with a group of people, whatever. But there's also like the ethos of improv games can be turned into things you can do one-on-one in all sorts of settings. And I think this is also some of, for me, that value of going through games and exercises and breaking down of a circle game, like Whoosh Bang Pow, where you're like passing different communications around a circle. It's like, okay, what is that really about? It's about having shared meaning. It's about who you're passing something to is being received. It's about playfulness and spontaneity. And okay, we can do, sure, we're not going to play Whoosh Bang Pow, the circle game, with 2 people because it just wouldn't go. But we can use those or something else. But it being in that playful spirit and mindset. And I think kids make moves to try to engage us in this all the time. That isn't just, mommy, come play with me, the dolls game. Although that also, I think, is improv. It is. Totally. They're really good. But that it also, the goofy look or the whatever, that if you can get it default in your body to go there with them, to respond, to lean in to stuff, which I think improv is really good at teaching folks to do, there's so much room for things to grow. And so I think it's also that, like just the playfulness factor and the underlying meeting them where they are factor. And then the just, you can use a straight up fun improv exercise as it is also, and that's also fun.
Yeah. It sounds like you don't even have to take an improv class or know these games or anything like that, but more just the approach, the mindset that you have when interacting with kids that might enable this kind of relationship building.
Like, I think that's exactly, go back to that, like the yes and brain idea of what is it when we're in that space, which I think speaks to the improviser when they're in that space. It's those moments when you see improvisers on stage or you are the improviser on stage when it just feels like it's like it's just flow state and it's just like they're so in sync. How are they? And it isn't a cognitive, like I'm not thinking, okay, he just scratched his face, so I should go do this thing. It's just unfolding. You're in the state where you are present to and responding to the things in front of you. The other person's doing it and you're building. And I think that is the same thing that is beautiful in parenting that can happen and really in any interactions. And I think it is there's so many distractions in life, whether that's phone and technology or chores and all of these pieces. But I think getting back to these roots of what is it to actually find each other and know each other in play and meet each other in a space of like deep presence and resonance where it can just flow like that, which may be like a playful goofiness, but also may just be a conversation that you're happening where you're deeply attuned in listening to your teenager and are aware of your own stuff that shows up that maybe wants you to jump into like lecturing, that makes you go, okay, I can just fully listen and attune to them and listen to understand instead of listening to respond, where I'm calculating my next move as they're talking, but not really with them. Yeah. So I think all the pieces.
Yeah. And so if you were working with someone who is new to parenting and trying to offer them this kind of space from which they could operate, how would you help them recognize ways to build that for themselves?
I mean, I think there's lots of different potential ins, but I would say one of the most valuable things that we can all do is get really attuned to our own internal kind of yes and cycle, and knowing what are the offers that are happening and bubbling up with inside of me. And am I aware of them, and am I responding to them? Because even I think sometimes we may have things like anxiety that show up that are going to shape what we do next and how we respond. And we can try sometimes, I think, to be like, I don't, that offer's here, I'm going to shove that away and pretend it isn't happening, but it doesn't actually make it go away. So what does it mean to be with that? And if I'm, this or that is happening with my kid and I'm feeling anxious, or I'm finding myself ready to be rigid about something, understanding, okay, wait, what is happening with me? What is the physical sensation that's showing up? What is the thought? What is the feeling? How am I holding awareness about that? How am I accepting it? Not necessarily saying, sure, anxiety, fear, take the wheel. I'd love for you to drive, but being like, that doesn't, again, that isn't the acceptance, but it's accepting. I am feeling anxiety. That's going to shape how I show up. Oh, I am feeling afraid. That's going to shape how I show up. Oh, I just had a reaction that was like really rigid and I snapped at my kid. That is the thing that just happened. So what do I do with that? What does it tell me about what I need? Like, how do I add on something meaningful that actually responds to and meets your own internal things that you've just marked? And then that cycle repeats. And because we're human, it's like there's often multi-cycles happening at once. Like we live in multitudes. It's not just now I feel anxiety and that is all I feel and I have time to process it. It's like I am feeling anxiety and also anger, but also I'm happy, but it's, so I mean, I would say before anything else, like that is a huge gift to give yourself and also your kids, because you're modeling to them this process, even if you're not verbalizing it out loud. But I think you're also allowing them to not be encumbered by your first default reaction. Like you are taking ownership of, this is what is happening inside of me. Let me be aware of it, understand it, so that I am not just externalizing that at you, unless that is what I want to do. But I think that would be my like number one place. And then I think as we do that also, like doing that kind of practicing listening to kids in the same way, when reflective on, oh yeah, what was happening here? And what are the different needs? What are the offers that are being made that are maybe verbal, maybe not verbal? What does that look like? But I think starting in that internal is a great place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also comes back to something you talked about earlier, is when you were designing the classes, that self-reflection, where afterwards you said what worked, what didn't, being able to do that so that it's not all real time. I have to figure out what's going on with me, what's going on with you.
Yes.
But yet, coming back to it afterwards and going, it didn't work as well when I did this, when I was feeling that way.
Yes. And I think that too of, so much of the, I think, beginner instructor, and sometimes, I mean, for everyone still can show up, and I think this is super relevant to parenting, especially when you're working with a group of youth in either class setting or you're just parenting, of when things feel like they're going off the rails, we often start panicking and the fear sets in. And in parenting land, sometimes in also educator, teaching, coaching, whatever land, there can be both the like fear of, but oh my gosh, if my kid talked back, are they just going to they can't do that when they have a job, and are they just going to end up in jail? And the escalator just goes real quick. I'm going to be the worst parent in the world if my kid talks back, because that means they're going to fail when they're 40. And it's okay. But it's the same thing in a classroom that can happen also, especially with siblings, where there's like some rowdiness and there's maybe like anxiety, your own stuff shows up. That could be about all kinds of things. It can be about like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose control of this, or I feel overwhelmed, or is my principal going to walk in, if you're a school teacher, and see me not controlling, quote unquote, the class. Like so much of it, I think also we're coming there's more moving out of this, which I'm grateful for. But I think many of us grew up in a very child domination centered framework where kids are to be controlled, and the good kid is the one who is like complying with things and doing what society expects of them and all of these pieces. And so when we are the adult in charge, whether the parent or the teacher, when it doesn't look like that's happening, we feel like that's a mar on us. And there's that panic for like, I need to get this under control, when really in a different moment, we'd zoom out and be like, oh yeah, nobody's actually dying because the room got loud for that minute. I'm not like, this is fine.
It's okay.
But I think so of not just unpacking, okay, what exercise did I do and how did it go? But also, what was happening for me emotionally? And like, when were the moments that I started panicking, and how did that show up? And what does it look like? When are the places where I lose access to my thinking brain? Because when all of us are stressed, our thinking brain goes offline and it just gets worse. I think my biggest, the thing that, if maybe above anything else, I don't know, I reserve the right to revise this statement because I'm saying it on the spot. But I think being able to keep myself regulated, even in a moment when the room is going into mayhem, because I've ran some, the shelter classes where it's, okay, great. Today I have 25 kids and they are all here and I am one, and they are ranging from 4 to 18. Okay, there's just going to be some chaos. And it's like, if you get swept in the wave of chaos, you are going to be in chaos. But if it is the moment where you can be like, this is chaos and this hurts my ears and my brain is a little melty, but also I can feel my chest being tight and I can take deep breaths and I can ground myself and I can be in this and be like, okay, like this is okay. We are okay. This moment is not, I've got tools and resources. Like, what do I want to do next? It may not take it from chaos to not that chaos, because I wouldn't, just listing out that group of people, you wouldn't developmentally expect that you can walk in and be like, I'm going to be the best teacher in the world, where everyone's going to like do everything and have perfect time and everyone's going to everything that I set up and it's going to meet everyone exactly where they are. It just isn't real. It's the same. And it's the same with kids, where it's like, of course you want, your kid to do the thing or achieve the thing or have the skill, whatever it is, expressing their feelings, navigating a tough moment, whatever. But it's not like you're failing if you can't think of the singular thing to do that makes it all magically perfect and like downloads a skill in them. It's just not how it goes. And so being able to be with the process of learn and expansion, like the messiness of life and the multitudes, which often are, okay, they are working on developing this skill. Also, they really struggled to execute it. Also, maybe that was hurtful to you or someone else that happened, and also wasn't intentional. This is also developmentally normal. Like, all of these things happen at the same time. But if we aren't aware of the pieces, it's really easy to just get lost in kind of that first stream of, oh my gosh, this has happened and shouldn't have. Now I'm going to lecture you. Or, oh my gosh, this has happened and shouldn't have. Now I'm panicking because am I a bad parent? Why aren't they doing this? I tried to do this. I tried to do that. And it's, I think, recognizing the being with and the iteration of it, of there is not a perfect parent. There is not any of these things. It's like, you just have to be there for the process, able to repair when there's been rupture and to do the best that you can. And that is okay.
Yeah, that reflective grace sounds so powerful.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, especially in parenting, I mean, teaching, of course, but my focus is parenting right now, is that we're not going to be perfect.
No.
It's not going to be that moment. But being able to go back afterwards and say, wow, this was hard. That didn't work. But I was there with the kid.
Yeah.
And you did that right.
Yeah, I showed up. And it is in parenting range, I worked for many years in the shelter settings that were for foster youth who were between placements. And so it's when you were there, you were the parent in that direct care kind of position. You are the human that is doing those layers. And it's hard. I think as you were saying, those exact pieces of, oh yeah, what does it mean to do this and to meet someone where they are? And I think in all of these settings, teaching more of parenting roles, I can think of times too of the value of also circling back with the kids also, and either in the moment or afterwards, the externalizing of that process, which I think there can be that pressure of, I need to know what to do or what to say here. And sometimes it's really important and okay and even valuable to say, you know what? I'm not actually sure what the best next thing is here. Like I'm finding myself wishing that I could say the thing that would make this all better, or wanting, to resolve this issue. But I also know that it's complex, and I don't know that I know exactly what should perfectly happen next, but I want to figure it out, and let's talk about it. And I think that normalization and like validity of just being like, yeah, I'm not always going to know. You're also not always going to know. And it is okay to say, don't actually know, but I'm still here. Like that's, I think an important layer.
What a great lesson for the kid as well. Oftentimes we try to present to children, adults know the answer, or adults have some kind of perfection that is utterly unattainable. And to be able to offer it to the child that, let's figure this out together, because I don't know where.
Yes. Yeah. And and I think there can be times too where let's say something has happened, like, I don't know, the kid's done something at school that's like, okay, this was not an okay thing. And it's okay, I know exactly how to help because I'm not at school all day long. I'm not sitting there naked. So I'm not really able to try to do a hands-on thing with this, but I recognize a need. And I think being able to say that opens the door for conversations of, okay, this thing has happened. Let's talk about it. I want to support you this and figure out what that means. Let's explore that versus, okay, this thing happened at school. Now I'm going to lecture you or say you can't do this because of whatever, or here's the thing. I think admitting, I can't, ultimately it's like, we really can't control kids. If they're really tiny, we can pick them up and move them somewhere. But even that, I'm like, yes, we could do some of those things when they're really little. But once kids having more of their own agency, it's like the best thing that we can do is sustain a relationship to where they want to keep turning to us and want to keep looking to us and allowing us to be a part of the process of becoming and turning into who they are and are going to be. And I think adults sometimes forget they treat children in ways they would never tolerate else in relationships, where it's like, if every time I went to someone, I felt like I was in trouble or chastised or made to feel small or shamed or lectured, or which of course, even if I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm not one of those really bad lecturers like my dad was, but still it's like the sort of, even if it's just the quick to give up, oh, this kid at school said a mean thing, and I'll just ignore them. The quick jump to that. That's like, okay, the kid, you didn't leave any opening room to talk through that of how was that and what was that like? Can I support you with this? And that was so hard, because the reality is a lot of things in life, there isn't a quick fix. A lot of it is moving through the feelings. And if we want our kids to be able to do that, we have to show them how and walk with them through that process, learn that from us. And I think that piece of, again, that yes and brain of, if someone is coming to us with something and we can genuinely slow down, know whatever our own stuff that comes up and manage that so that we're not accidentally it out and
it's always there.
Oh yeah, always. And it's, and it's like, and we're not bad guys because we have that. It's like everyone has their stuff.
We're human.
And it's knowing what it is that shows up. And if there is something that shows up big and strong, needs to be worked through, that we do the work we need to do around it, because there can be that can show up for folks depending on their childhood and their patterning and all of this. But I think if you can truly be a grounded, present human with kids, not even all the time, but enough of the time, they want to keep turning to that. Those that it's the good enough parent is essentially one who is not perfect all the time. It's literally research around quote unquote the good enough parent. And it's,
I love that.
If you Google the good enough parent, And it basically speaks to this exact fact that it's you can actually have a lot of rupture, a pretty high percentage of rupture in a relationship, as long as also and also repair that happens. So it doesn't mean you snapped because you were tired and whatever, and it's, oh no, game over. It's no, that's okay. You are also a human that has, and the more that we can know, okay, what happened? And also be paying attention to whatever comes up afterwards, whether that is shame and catastrophizing about, oh, I can't believe I did that or snapped or whatever, or whether that is maybe buckling down and defensiveness around it. Like whatever it is, like when we know that also, it gives us, we move into that like driver's seat of being able to pick what happens next rather than being the passive recipient of our like older internalized patterns that all of us have.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I bring intention to this? And through doing that, we also are teaching kids to do that.
Yes, that's very powerful for them. Does any of this change when working with neurodivergent kids?
Like I would say largely no, in terms of like, which I think people are always surprised by this answer. And a lot of folks who will reach out specifically around teaching classes and, okay, what game should I use and what curriculum should I use? And I think that it is, and I do have like fully developed curriculum, but I think it is more about like the important pieces that need to be learned are more about the like approach layers and how do I know how to scaffold things, whether that is an improv skill or a life skill or anything circling up successfully. And like, how can I plan for that? Like if it is a class setting, like scaffolding in the curriculum, building skills where I'm not going to ask people to do a full-length improvised play if we've never done a scene. That would be dumb. And it's scaffolding within a specific exercise if I'm teaching it of, okay, I'm not going to lay out 20 rules all at once and then be like, okay, great, let's go. It's like, all right, cool. Here's the first thing. Let's do that. Great. Here's the next tweak.
Yes.
And then I think there's how do you emotionally scaffold in response to what's happening? If the room's going into chaos, okay, do we need to shift this in a specific way? How do I reactively adjust what I'm doing according to what's unfolding? How can I proactively anticipate, okay, the room's really quiet. I'm going to add in a game that maybe brings up some energy. The room is really full of energy. We might be doing a storytelling thing where we're also laying on our backs to bring it down. Lots of options. I think with any population, it is about meeting folks where they are. And I will say, I think the more that you understand about a population, whoever you're working with. And so if, there are things that you can know and recognize and be prepared to respond to, that's obviously useful. But I think a lot about things that I ran for many years at the Hideout or for different ages of youth that we had improv classes that ran semester long for autistic youth, some that were in kind of the like pre-teen age, we had teens and then eventually young adults. And there was an improv marathon every year where a set group of adult improvisers were on stage for a stupid number of hours, like 40 plus in a row doing improv, no sleep. Just bad choices for health and body. But it was a fundraiser. And every hour they were joined by different groups who did different formats, all of this. So there's like the 8 core people. And every year we would always have a group of students from our classes join on stage with these improvisers, many of whom had never worked with an autistic youth in their life, who had no reference anything, but they were all excellent improvisers because they selected for this thing and were deeply trained improvisers. And there were no problems because they just deeply met them where they were. And we're like, okay, whatever you are giving me, I can play with that. I can work with that, build on this. Let's do it together. Totally. And so it was just this, like, I think, testament to that framework of when you can access that mindset, then it's like you can meet folks there. And obviously that was like a performance setting. But I think that same piece of, yes, there can be some things that show up in those classes that maybe are not as likely to happen in other classes. I might have a kid who has a deep interest in one specific thing and really struggles to integrate any other suggestions. And it's like, okay, that looks different. Actually, that different. It is just ultimately, this person's got a deep interest in this thing. Can I either the thing we're doing where that is okay and just works fine because whatever you say are the rules? Can it be okay, if I want them to explore some other interest because that makes them more fun to play with in terms of becoming a good improviser. Like other people generally don't want to do the same topic over and over again. They like variety. Okay, so I'm not going to just tell them to do that, but what are the ways that we can start flexing that muscle or practicing that a little bit? Are we still in the world of whatever it is, but we're tweaking something about it, or where they can be a character from that world, but someone else is a different character from a different world, and what does it look like when we blend those? And so to me, it's like some of the things that come up might be different, but ultimately it's all the same. Who is this person in front of me? What are the offers they're giving me? Okay, sure. If we look at it clinically, someone can be like, oh, yes, that is a clinical marker of what we might expect for someone who is autistic. But if we look at it human-wise, it's okay, what information does it give me? That this person is super into this thing. It's an area they have a ton of knowledge about, which also, we also know research-wise that like people learn things really well when they get to connect it to areas of expertise. And so what are the ways we can build on that? What are the ways we can use that?
Yeah.
And I think in the same, yes, there can be some different elements that show up in like social context in these pieces, but I think it's ultimately the same of just who's in front of me, what's working, how do we build on the strengths that isn't working? Okay, how do we scaffold, build progressively? And I think really importantly, manage my own expectations, right? Because I think in that example of, okay, I want you to have a varied scene topics. I think young improviser me is, but there has to be variety. We need to know you have to do this. No, you have to do that. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, how do I meet you? And I think it's the same folks who are different, which I include myself in this category in whatever kind of way. When someone doesn't meet expectations socially, a lot of the sociocultural norms are you need to get in line. You need to do it differently. You are failing. Yeah. And so it's really easy to have that response or that anxiety. And I think this is true in parenting realm too, of even if you fully are like, I think my kid's great, you may be facing pressure from the school or from some other external source that is expecting your kid to be a certain way, to perform a certain way, to do something specific. Or perhaps you yourself were like, oh, I wish my kids and I liked the same type of books and we could have deep dialogue about this, because all parents have their like fantasy about who their kid's going to be, even if they try to like grasp that loosely. And to meet all the layers of that too, internally, what is it, if that is the case, okay, do I feel some grief there that my kid, whatever neurotype, doesn't like this thing that I like and we don't get to bond over this? They're an indoor kid and I'm an outdoor adult or whatever.
Yeah.
And okay, what is there? Okay, there's some grief. I want to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean you don't love your kid. It doesn't mean anything. It just means, yeah, there's grief there. Also, there can be celebration of that kid for who they are and an appreciation of them knowing themselves and drawing a hard line about never camping or whatever. But I think it is like, how are we holding those pieces? So a bit tangential, but I think the ultimate conclusion to what you said is that it is both very different and not different at all. Because I think these, whether you're talking about it in an improv class or you're talking about these kind of underlying relational pieces and being in this brain space, like they are the same moves. It's going to look different depending on what offers you're getting and who's in front of you and what offers they're sending and what offers you're coming up. But it's ultimately all the same. So how am I deeply attuning and listening and responding to what's here and meeting it?
And I think that sums up everything so well, is if you approach it with that and you stay true to that and sort of process that afterwards as well, as how did I do in that space, in those spaces? Maybe next time, maybe it'll be a little easier, a little better, or
that's it.
You'll have a totally different circumstance, but that'll be fine too.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to sort of wrap up then, is that if you have this mindset, if you have this approach and you revisit it and you assess, how was this? How did that go? What could I try? Then it can work.
I think that's it. It is this iterative, progressive layers of whether it's a specific tool or thing, we develop our default response patterns through the experiences we have. And sometimes they are things we intentionally choose or ever think about from our childhood. But when we do think about them, we gain back this agency. And when we get to have these experiences, it creates the next iteration of response and the thing that we get to lean into and benefit from and bring into our relationships.
Glorious. I love that. Is there anything else you want to discuss? I've taken all the question time so far, but
No, that's okay.
you know.
Yeah, no, I think you've had really great questions. There's so many things that could be talked about, but I think covered a lot of good
Maybe
things.
we'll do another one
Yep.
sometime.
Cool.
Cool.